In today's first reading, it's all about how foolish it is to get attached to possessions, property. But I would say that's equally true for far more than just property. It also, I think, holds true for any kind of attitudes, money, career, image, our life. And Jesus was even more clear. He said, hey, life does not consist of possessions, right? Now, why would he say that? I think it's because all it brings ultimately is grief. At least that's what it did for Tracy. Tracy worked in my unit when I worked for DuPont 40 years ago. And Tracy was very attached to money and possessions. He was so attached to his possessions that he never threw anything away, including decades of newspapers. Now, we could see that was not going in a good place. And people in his crew tried to reach him, tried to get him to let go of that old self that we heard about in St. Paul, tried to get him to our plant doctor. At the time, we had an actual doctor on, that worked for us on site all the time, and he tried to reach him, right? His nephew tried to reach him to get him to see something different. But no matter what people tried to do to help him, it was always viewed through the lens of, is this going to cost me money or is it going to make me money? If it was going to cost him money, he would consider it if he was going to make money. But if it was going to cost him, no way. Like everybody was saying, Tracy, I think you need counseling. He said, well, that's going to cost money. I'm not doing that. Someone tried to get him to go to church and had a bit of success. But this was the sales pitch. You can come. It doesn't cost you a penny to come to church. And not only that, but we will throw in a free dinner at home, at our house, Sunday dinner, and it won't cost you anything. So actually, in a way, you're making money. And he tried it, but his heart wasn't in it because it was all about the money and his possessions. We had no idea of the pain and the grief that was causing. I mean, we got a glimpse of it. But no matter how hard we tried, no one could get him to let go of that old self, or even part of that old self. And it became really clear to us when his nephew went in his house after a very premature, very abrupt death. We hold on to our possessions wind up owning us. Tracy's money and possessions told him what to do. Tracy was no longer in charge of his life. His possessions were. And I think that's what happens on any kind of attachment, no matter what it is. Drugs, alcohol, career, it will all go south on us sooner or later. Do you ever step back and think about, you read about the saint of the day or something or whatever. You ever notice how many of our saints in their early life, were rich? They were some kind of royalty, king, queen, prince, right? Some kind of nobility, something up there, right? They had a lot of possessions and a lot of things and prestige. But somewhere along the line, they found freedom in letting it go. And the saint that just hits me hard when I think about this is St. Francis of Assisi. St. Francis of Assisi came from a rich family. His dad was a very rich merchant. And St. Francis, He literally let go of his old self in the town square when he stripped naked and rejected those riches and rejected the privilege that came with it. He turned out to be quite a saint. He wound up being able to see the Christ in all that we hear about in the second reading, right? He saw Christ in people. He saw Christ in wolves. He saw Christ in birds. He saw God in all creation, and he rejoiced in it. Tremendous joy. Another one comes to mind. All right, well, let me just say this, though, right? Yeah, St. Francis had that big dramatic letting go of the old self when he stripped down. But don't get the wrong idea, right? This taking off the old self and putting on the new self is not a one-time thing. It's more like peeling an onion, the layers of an onion. Now, admittedly, some of us have a whole lot more layers to peel back and let go of, right? But it's a gradual thing, and at some point you realize how naked we are. Maybe it's on our deathbed. Another saint comes to mind is St. Ignatius of Loyola. St. Ignatius of Loyola had these grand dreams of being the knight, the shining knight, looking good in his armor, looking good in all his fancy duds, being the hero, being the one that takes charge, the hero of the battle. And all of that came crashing down when a cannonball broke his leg. They set the leg, and when it healed, it didn't look good. It didn't fit his image of what that knight's supposed to look like. He was so vain that he said, break it again and let's do a do-over. Now remember, back then when they were recovering from something like that, it wasn't a week or two, it was months of laying around. And during that time, boredom got to him and he started reading. He asked for books. He got this book called The Life of Christ and he started reading it. And over those months, he started letting go. He started peeling back the onion. And, ultimately he became a great saint. Ultimately, he founded the Society of Jesus, which we know more commonly as the Jesuits. And St. Ignatius of Loyola wrote this, and I'm going to read it because it's so good. I can't possibly express this whole thing about letting go and all that as well as St. Ignatius did. And it's called First Principle and Foundation by St. Ignatius of Loyola. Now, I'm going to suggest this is really good and it's a lot to chew on. So what you might think about during the coming week, go Google it or get someone to print it off for you, St. Ignatius of Loyola, First Principle and Foundation. But I want you to listen to this and listen close. The goal of our life is to be with God forever. God who loves us gave us life. Now listen to this. This always gets me. Our own response of love allows God's life to flow into us without limit. That without limit always gets me. All the things in this world are gifts from God, presented to us so that we can know God more easily and make a return of love more readily. As a result, we appreciate and use all these gifts of God, listen, insofar as they help us develop as loving persons. But if any of these gifts become the center of our lives, they displace God and so hinder our growth toward our goal. In everyday life, then, we must hold ourselves in balance before all these created gifts insofar as we have a choice. And we're not bound by some obligation. We should not fix our desires on health or sickness, wealth or poverty, success or failure, a long life or a short one. For everything, listen to this, everything has the potential of calling forth in us a deeper response to our life in God. Our only desire and our one choice should be this: I want and I choose what better leads to the deepening of God's life in me. Amen? Amen.